GNU, the Government of National Unity. What's been done? How far are we? What's left to be done? Let's make that palatable for you. So in terms of my analysis, there are 5 components to this GNU for it to be complete and effective. The first milestone, we passed in terms of electing a president, speaker, deputy speaker. The second milestone was the one we passed now, which was the appointment of cabinet, which the president did on the 30th of June, which we'll go into now. The third and fourth one, the order doesn't really matter. I'm not sure which one will follow, but both need to be done. But for the sake of this, we'll assume that the cabinet lekgotla and a national dialogue, but for government purposes, cabinet lekgotla is the focus. The cabinet lekgotla is essentially where government gets its mandate for the next 12 months. What it's going to prioritize, where the synergies are, how to ensure that they're all aligned, who's going to do what, and how they're going to be held accountable, including KPIs, etc. The fourth component is Parliament. The first sitting of Parliament is going to be on the 18th of July. But the component of the Parliament which requires a GNU is the allocation of who's going to be this portfolio chair, who's going to be in that portfolio, etc. So that makeup of Parliament and how GNU is going to function in Parliament is going to be very interesting, particularly when it comes to the element of passing of bills, because we know of the ideology difference. However, that is also where the national dialogue and the cabinet lekgotla become important, because those things need to be agreed up front. For example, the budget needs to be voted on. Without a clean consensus and a 50+1, we won't be able to pass a budget. The fifth component, which I don't believe we are going to hear much about, but we've seen signs of it, is with regards to the administration, the director generals, and how that's going to be done. We've seen historically ANC with the cater deployment, which the DA took ANC to court to have those records published. We're still seeing how that's going, but I mean, there are redacted records that have been published by both. However, we have seen the letter from the DA to the ANC, where, along with their cabinet demands, they were requesting that the director generals in the departments which they have ministers be elected, or rather be selected by a panel of DA ministers. This was obviously very carefully worded to ensure that it doesn't necessarily come back to the DA, but by saying it's DA ministers, you are effectively taking the component of DA and basically running a second or a parallel government, which was what we saw in the president's response to the letter. So that one's going to be interesting to watch. Now, coming back to cabinet, let me first start by saying the president is elected. So we have a deputy president. Let's say Phala comes, president's motion of no confidence, he has to go. In that event, the speaker is the one that becomes acting president. A president has to be elected by parliament. So that doesn't mean by de facto that the deputy president, Paul Mashatile, or even if it was John Steenhuisen, would become president. President has to be elected, but deputy president or different members of cabinet can act with full president powers. I mean, we saw this in '98 when the late Prince Buthelezi was acting president and he sent the army into Lesotho. But that's a story for a different day. Another interesting point for clarification is that the president will be able to have a full 2 terms. In terms of section 88.2 of the Constitution, highlights that if a president comes in to fill in for the term of another, basically comes up of a vacancy from resignation or motion of no confidence, that term doesn't count. So the term of President Cyril from 2018 to the election of 2019 doesn't count as his term. He gets his full term, which is the 6th and 7th administration. In terms of the Government of National Unity, it's not the first time we hear of it. It's not the first time we do it. It was done in 1994. However, when that was done, it was done to achieve a political mandate of ensuring political stability. The inclusion of IFP and also the sunset clause or whatever it was, story for a different day, where we even had 2 deputy presidents. De Klerk later resigned, and then in 96, the constitution came in, which only made provision for 1 deputy president. With regards to the recent cabinet announcement, there were 5 major changes. The first one, the merging of electricity and energy. The second one was the separation of higher education with science, technology, and innovation. The third one was the separation of agriculture and land reform. The fourth was the separation of justice and correctional services. And the fifth one was the removal of public enterprise, which was held by former Minister Pravin Gordhan. Of the new cabinet, there are 32 ministers and 43 deputy ministers. Quite a big cabinet. What is the role of a minister? So a minister is supposed to provide strategic oversight and assist with the functioning of the department. However, a minister doesn't get involved with regards to the operations, the procurement, the tenders within a department. That is purely run by the Director General. It's purely to give oversight, strategic direction, and accounts to Parliament. Director General also accounts directly to Parliament. They are the accounting officer and they're responsible for the day-to-day operations. Deputy President and Deputy Ministers do not have a outright role. Well, neither with ministers. However, ministers are part of cabinet and they get their mandate directly from the President. Deputy Ministers get their mandate from the ministers, if any mandate. So sometimes you see deputy minister would be redundant, sometimes you see them active, and that is purely based on the relationship between minister and deputy minister, which is going to be interesting, particularly where you have ministries, example education, where a DA minister and a ANC deputy minister. The role of the deputy president, this historically has been given the leader of government business, purely at the prerogative of the president, who decides it can be moved, like we saw in the DA letters where there was a request for that to be moved to Minister of Presidency. What is the cost of the cabinet to you and I? A minister earns 2.7 million. A deputy minister earns 2.2 million. When you factor in all the numbers, including the president and deputy president, almost 190 million goes to the package of president, deputy president, ministers, and deputy ministers. This excludes their staff, security, household, etc. A breakdown of these ministries. So of the 32 ministers, obviously we've seen ANC get 20 of them. What's interesting is in that 20 of the ANC, it has made provision for the alliance, being SACP, COSATU, SANCO. It's made provision for the Women's League and also provincial representation. ANC has 33 deputy ministers, DA has 6 deputy ministers, and then the balance is made up of political parties, IFP2 and the rest 1111, which gets to the 33. There are 4 parties that don't form part of the GNU. These largely being the MK, EFF, Action SA, and the ATM. What are the qualifications of our executive? Should be interesting, right? Of the 29 that we were able to find something on, 26 of them have some type of tertiary education. There were 3, however, that only have a matric. John Sienazen, the other is a leader of the Patriotic Alliance, Gayton McKenzie. There are, however, 5 that have PhDs, 2 from DA, 2 from ANC, and 1 from Freedom Front Plus. What's going to be interesting in terms of this cabinet is to see how they manage the differences in ideologies and positions. I mean, we'll give an example. We've seen the ANC has the portfolio of DIRCO, Department of International Relations and Cooperation. So we understand that that is to ensure that their mandate with regards to BRICS goes ahead, to see that the SA stance with regards to Palestine remains intact. However, there are components where some of this clashes. We'll give an example of agriculture. There's AGOA, there's trade. Are we going to lean more to AGOA? Are we going to lean more to BRICS? With regards to the poultry industry also, there's the education component, the basic education component. With that one, there's the billable. We've seen the stance from political parties on that and that of the ANC. It hasn't been signed into law as yet, but it is one of the contentious issues which we're going to have to just watch and see. One that's going to be interesting to watch is with regards to finance. Yes, the ANC have retained the Minister of Finance. They also have retained the Deputy Minister of Finance, but there has been an additional one, which was given to DA. So historically speaking, the Deputy Minister of Finance has been the chairperson of the PIC, which is the Public Investment Corporation, which is responsible for government pensions. That's going to be an interesting to watch, to see who's going to be the next chairperson of the PIC. In terms of the fourth one, Parliament, the first sitting is going to be on the 18th of July. The President's going to be addressing it, and by then we should know who the portfolio committees are going to be and how Parliament is going to run. For example, we'll see how RISE is going to be factored in to the GNU. And let's see, maybe there'll also be space for EFF, who did make a last-minute plea. However, they still had the condition of no DA. So what's the next step there? We'll have to wait and see. With that said, it's going to be interesting to see how, for example, the Department of Education has a DA minister and an ANC deputy minister, or even Public Works, a relationship that's going to be interesting to watch, where former Minister Sihle Zikalala is now Deputy Minister. The DA have been given Minister, and they've given a fellow who only has matric, and Sihle, as a Deputy Minister, has a Master's. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Guys, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, let us know what else you want to hear. Palatable Politics, TJ Maslela. Shout out.